Hi everyone and welcome to Module 54. We're going to talk about adulthood in all its categories of development: physical, cognitive, and social. Here are your learning objectives and here's your vocab. So the physical development in middle adulthood, so we're talking about 40s to 60. Well, here's the thing. You actually have a decline that starts in your 20s in terms of your physical ability. So this is imperceptible decline. So think about athletes, like Major League Baseball athletes, like when are they in their prime? And maybe you're not a major league or, NHL player or whatever, but there is a decline that you can't perceive. So kind of think about it hitting your absolute threshold. Like at some point you will notice, but that's usually not until middle adulthood. When you do notice in middle adulthood, it's been going on for years. What is more important in your middle adulthood in terms of your physical fitness is your habits in terms of exercise. And so in middle adulthood, your hormone levels are fluctuating. Testosterone is decreasing for men, estrogen is decreasing for women, and women also experience menopause, which is when their period stops, ending their ability to carry a child, and men also experience a life expectancy. That has actually increased worldwide significantly, and you can look over here for more details because it depends on location. Women do outlive men by 4.5 years about. We've talked about this before, but don't forget that telomeres are an important factor in our life expectancy, and those are the little things, little tips of the chromosomes that they can get worn down by stress or smoking or obesity, and they basically are things that they age you, right? So someone can look older just because of stress or obesity or smoking, all of those things that kind of put stress on your body. Chronic anger and depression increase your risk of dying before the typical life expectancy, but most people do live a full and long life. Just want to reiterate that. There is something known as the death deferral phenomenon where people die sooner after reaching an important event like Christmas or a birthday that was important or a wedding, and then they die after that. And that shows up in statistics. We also, in middle adulthood, start to lose some of our sensory abilities. They're not as sharp, such as vision, muscle strength, as we've already discussed, reaction time, and smell and hearing and touch. They all kind of your health. So there's two parts to this that people forget. We know that older people have a weakened immune system. But what we tend to forget is that older people also have built up way more immunity because they've been exposed to so many different types of things. So they're less likely to, for example, get the flu. They're more likely to have immunity to it. However, if they do get the flu, they're more likely to be hit with it worse than a 20-something. Let's talk about the brain. We're going to talk about the brain for a little while. So processing speed slows down. That's your fluid intelligence. And your processing speed also slows down. But things like crystallized intelligence, such as vocab, knowledge, those things stay the same. And it's, again, a small, gradual decline. And again, exercising can really make a difference for your brain. Not just, I know there's a lot of puzzles and things like that, which they're good at helping your brain know how to do those puzzles, but exercise is actually way more important than doing a crossword puzzle. It slows the aging process, even the progression of Alzheimer's, because it helps those telomeres. So let's talk quickly about aging and memory. So recall is actually going to go on a slight decline, and recognition is going to stay strong. As you can see here, from age 30 to the 40s through the 60s, that is still strong for recognition, whereas recall is starting to decline. If there is a meaningful memory and it's not meaningless to the individual, they will actually do really well at remembering it. So how do we keep those mental abilities strong in middle adulthood? Well, there's a lot of programs that want you to buy their product to help your memory. The reality is that a lot of those computer-based programs are really good at helping your memory with those computer-based programs or ones similar to them. They don't actually help you remember the things that are more functional, like the whole reason why you'd really want to use them to help you be functional in your day-to-day, in terms of like whether it's like doing your taxes or maintaining your bills, things like that. So when we look at all of these aging studies, there are two types of studies that are done. The first is cross-sectional. If you look over here, you see all of these different individuals being studied at the same time. So let's give them all a memory test about recall and recognition all in once in 2021 and see like what's the difference between the 15-year-old, the 30-year-old, and the 65-year-old. That's a cross-sectional, across the ages, versus a longitudinal. Think of the word long. You take individuals, let's say you take 100 individuals and you study them at 15, 25, 35, 45, 55, etc. So it's a long haul type of research where you're studying the same people over a period of time. Now, neurocognitive disorders which is another term for dementia, is an umbrella term that really encompasses a lot of different neurocognitive memory type deficits. So Alzheimer's would be one that's included. A brain injury could also cause it, or substance abuse could also cause this aging of the brain, but it is not normal aging of the brain. Most people who live into their 90s have a clear mind. So having dementia is not just an expectation of getting old. It is abnormal. It is something that is going awry with the brain. So let's talk about Alzheimer's disease for a second. So it's a neurocognitive disorder, as we just said, marked by these neural plaques. So what happens is, and it says it here in the symptoms, there are these acetylcholine, which we said is important for memory and for muscle movement, right? So that neurotransmitter, it starts to deteriorate, and you have these shriveled pieces of protein that have broken off and they clump together, and it creates this plaque in the brain. And it's a buildup of that plaque that they see as correlated to Alzheimer's. It is not normal aging. Like I said, there are different stages of it. So depending on the stage the person is, kind of shows how much they're going to be able to do or remember or function in life, because it starts with the memory things, but then it goes to emotion and being disoriented, and then the person might lose the ability to speak or have other issues surrounding that. There is technology that can test for the gene, and they can test for those protein fragments we were talking about, and they have located the 21 genes associated with Alzheimer's. So, is there a midlife crisis in your 40s, 50s, and 60s? The answer is no. If someone has a life crisis, which 1 in 4 adults do experience this, it's usually because of a major life event, an illness, a divorce, a job loss, not because of their age. And actually, when we look at those significant life events, they're not commonly occurring in your 40s. Your 20s, you're more likely to have a divorce. 70s and 80s have higher rates of suicide. And emotional instability is not a trend of your 40s. Now, you do have a little bit of stress on you if you are a 40 or 50 something and you are experiencing this sandwich generation phenomenon, which is where you have aging parents who need your help, your time, maybe they need financial support, and then you also have children who need your time, your finance, your money, and your support. So they're sandwiched between these two generations, helping them out. Now, in middle adulthood and really throughout your whole life, there's something called the social clock. And this is when society tells us it's the right time to do X, Y, or Z. So it's the right time to get married. It's the right time to have a kid. It's the right time to retire. The social clock is what our culture teaches us is the right time to do a certain life event. When we look at love, a couple of things that we see. We see that love tends to be most satisfying when it's enduring, when there is emotional and material support, and when there is intimate self-disclosure, when you're really getting deep with that person in conversation. And we also notice that there is something that they coined vow power. And they note this in your textbook, where there is the love is actually more enduring if the people get married. And that is true for both same-sex marriages and heterosexual marriages. And it's even stronger if the people are over the age of 20 and are well educated. Divorce rates have dropped, and I think that has to do with the fact that or partly to do with the fact that people are getting married later. They are becoming more educated overall as a society. People do look for their relationships online. That's not shocking. Here's just a picture showing you the divorce rates, and you can see that 20 to 24 in both women and men is by far the highest age group getting a divorce. So when we look at the whole lifespan, how do people feel towards the end of the lifespan? So older adulthood, what do they look back and think about that makes them feel regretful? And it's not actually the things that they did, the things that they made mistakes about. It's the things that they didn't do. They didn't tell someone they loved them. They didn't travel. They didn't take advantage of an opportunity in like education, for example. The things that they didn't do, that's where they actually feel more regret. People assume that old age will just be miserable. It must be because listen to all these horrible things that are happening to you, but you actually have a different perspective on life, and positive feelings grow after midlife. You actually focus more on positive things than you do on the negatives. So finally, let's talk about in old adulthood, death and dying. So there's a lot of cultural ties, obviously, to death and dying, specifically around grieving and how you should grieve. There is no one right way to grieve, right? But different cultures have different beliefs around that. And there is no evidence that you go through specific stages in the grieving process. That is something that has been debunked. And it's not like, oh, if someone doesn't cry at the funeral or doesn't do this or that, like they're not processing it. And it's going to cause all of these problems. What we do know is that if the death is sudden or unexpected, then the grief can be particularly difficult to handle. And while like different things like support groups can help, what helps the most is just the passage of time. If it is the death of a child, it is something that is particularly difficult, and also a significant other is particularly difficult. So takeaways. Remember that aging minds have longer processing speeds, but they're still very knowledgeable. Sensory abilities dull, but they are still there. People who are middle adulthood and older are not less happy, just like we used to think. Exercise and stress play an important role in health, especially after your 20s. Alzheimer's is a neurocognitive disease, and it's not typical aging. The social clock is when society tells you it's time to do something, certain time period in your life. Marriage is desirable by most Americans, and commitments tend to be more enduring if there is marriage and if the individuals are older than 20 and educated. There are no stages to grieving. Everyone does it differently, and that's okay. So that sums up Mod 54, and I will see